Greetings. So this is part 7. Remember your ancient past. So I'm gonna light Santo Pal. I hope everyone's doing perfect. This smells really good. It smells like super fresh. Can you guys smell it? Before I start reading, before we start reading, so here we go. Okay. Violante. Go for Go. Okay, my story. This is the author's story. John Valo Malchividic. I think his name is like Daniel. No, that's his real name. Okay. So this is story. This is his story. My story. Berkeley beginnings. Some of you may not accept the possibility of communications with beings on other dimensional levels, but this is what took place in my life. I didn't ask for it, it just happened. As it turned out, I had almost daily communications on interdimensional levels for a number of years with this man, Thoth. Now that I understand it more, my personal relationship with Thoth really began when I was in college at Berkeley. I majored in physics and minored in mathematics until I was just about to receive my diploma. I needed only one more quarter to graduate. I decided I didn't want the degree because I had discovered something about physics that turned me off to the idea of becoming involved in a science that I believed was no science at all. This is all changing now. This in itself could be a book, but why but the why of it is related to the same thing I said about archaeologists, physicists. Sorry, just like archaeologists will turn their heads away from the truth if it means too much of a change too fast. Perhaps the real truth is that This is a human nature, so I switched to the other side of my brain and started majoring in fine arts. My counselors thought I was nuts. You're going to physics, give up a physics degree? They asked, but I didn't need it, didn't want it. Then to graduate, I had to go for 2 more years majoring in fine arts and art history. Changing majors makes sense now because when you study the ancient writings, you find out that the ancients perceived art, science, and religion as interwoven, interconnected. So the programming I was putting myself through was appropriate for what I'm doing now. So back in the past, they all these sciences, they were all like together. Now everything's like separated, and that's how they can't agree on nothing. They're just like, oh, and then they can't really say how they really feel because then they'll get shunned. So here we go. Dropping out to Canada. I got my degree in 1970. After going through Vietnam and looking what was happening in our country at the time, I finally said, I've had it. This is it. I don't know how long I'm going to live or what's going to happen, but I'm just going to be happy and do what I always wanted to do. I decided to get away from everything and go live in the mountains like I had always wanted. So I left the United States and went to Canada, not knowing there would be thousands of Vietnamese war protesters following me. A year later, I married a woman named Renee, and the two of us went into the middle of nowhere and found a little house on Cotinay Lake. We were a long way away from anything. You had to walk 4 miles from the nearest road to get to my house, so we were really isolated. I began to live my life exactly like I had always wanted to live. I had always wanted to see if I could live on nothing, so I gave it a try. It was a little scary at first, but it got easier as time went on, and pretty soon I became adept at natural living. Adept at natural living. I lived a wonderful and full life on basically no money. After a while, I realized, hey, this is a lot easier than holding a job in a city. I had to work hard for about 3 hours a day. Then I had the rest of the. He's chilling, huh? He had the rest of the day off. It was great. I could play music, run around, and have a good old time, and that's exactly what I did. I had fun. I played music about 10 hours a day with lots of friends who came from miles around. Our place had gained quite a reputation by then. We just had fun in doing this, which is very important to my understanding now. I discovered something about myself. It was from this returning to my inner child is how I phrase it these days, that my inner child was released, and in that releasing something happened to me that was the catalyst that led into my life as it led into my life as it is today. The childlike mentality. And I remember like verses in the Bible says something like think like a child or something. I don't know, like at heart or something. So, 2 angels and where they led me. So he's saying he has like 2 angels that are guiding him, And I've kind of felt the same way too when I was very younger, like 2 angels. So here we go. While in Vancouver, Canada, we decided that we wanted to know about meditation, so we started studying with a Hindu teacher who lived in the area. My wife and I were very serious about wanting to understand what meditation was about. We had made hooded white silk robes to show respect. Then one day, after practicing meditation for about 4 to 5 months, two tall angels about 10 feet appeared in our room. They were right there. One was green and one was purple. We could see through their transparent bodies, but they were definitely there. We did not expect this to take place, nor did we ask for it. We were just following the instructions that our Hindu teacher was giving us. I don't believe he fully understood either, as he kept asking us many questions. From that moment on, my life, it was never the same. It wasn't even close. Yeah, my neighbor told me a story about her son that the other day when I was hanging out with her, and she said that her son was like young, like 5, 6 years old, and he was playing on a tree, and I guess like he fell, and she was like, she couldn't run, she couldn't move, she was just like, oh my god. But she said that she's seen like liquid, like an angel, like mist, like kind of like see through, like angel, transparent, that kind of like moved him and kind of like lessened the blow, like falling. He fell from like a little treehouse, and I was like, but because I was asking her, well, how did he look like, and she was like, I was like, was he like transparent? She was like, yeah. Was he like water, like mist? And she's like, kind of like that. And there's videos like that. So it's very interesting that these things do happen. Angels can come out of nowhere and save people, and there's documented accounts, people, and it's just reminded me of another story. Yeah, I just lost it, but it was the same topic about the angels. Okay, but here we go. The first words the angel said were, "We are you." I had no idea what they meant. I said, "You're me?" Then slowly they began to teach me various things about myself and the world and about the nature of consciousness. Finally, my heart completely opened up to them. I could feel tremendous love for them, which totally changed my life. Over a period of many years, they led me to about 73 different teachers. They would actually tell me in the meditation the addresses and the phone numbers of the teachers I was to go see. They would tell me either to call first or just show up at his or her house so I could do this, and it would always be the right person. Then I would be instructed to stay with that person for a certain length of time. Sometimes, right in the middle of a particular teaching, the angels would say, "Okay, you're done, leave." So he's just going through, like his journey, and that's very interesting. Very interesting. He's being guided, and sometimes that's how I feel it is. Like you see things or like you hear things, and if it rings a bell, you start like kind of tuning in and homing in on that frequency, and you start coming across more things that are related to that. The patterns, like Transformers. I remember when they sent me to Ramdas. I hung out in his house for about 3 days, wondering what the heck I was doing there. Then one day, I went to touch him on the shoulder to say something, and I got a zap that particularly knocked me to the floor. The angel said, "That's it. You can leave now." And I said, "Okay." Ramdas and I became friends. But whatever I was supposed to learn from him was over within that 1 second. The teachings of Neem Koroli Baba Ramdas' teacher are very important to me. It was his belief that the best form to see God is in every form. I've also been exposed to Yagamanda's work and cherish who he was. Later, we'll be talking about Sir Shiri Yok Swar and some of his works. I've been intensely involved in almost all the major religions. I've resisted the sheiks because I do not believe that military preparation is necessary. See, and that's like the Bible is like a lot of different warrior clans, priest clans, anointed ones. Like David. He was like a warrior, and they told him he couldn't enter heaven, because he shed too much blood and this and that. But I think he had to get like cleansed by Solomon or something, or I think that was his son. But they were like all doing a lot of spells and stuff. But I've studied the practice almost all the but I've studied and practiced almost all the rest of them: Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Taoist, Sufi, Hindu, Tibet, Buddhist. I've deeply studied Taoism and Sufism. I spent 11 years with the Sufisms. However, through all these studies, the most important teachers for me have been the Native Americans. It was the Indians who opened the doorway for all my spiritual growth to take place. They've been a very powerful influence in my life, but that's another story, some of which I'll give in time. Interesting. A lot of, the natives have a lot of stories, great stories, and sad ones too, from, the genocides, the whole slaughters. Okay. All the world's religions are speaking of the same reality. They have different worlds, different concepts and ideas, but there's really only one reality, and there's only one spirit moving through all life. There might be different techniques to get to different states of consciousness, but there's only what is real, and when you're there, you know it. Whenever you want to call it, you can give it different names. It's all the same thing. Reality, the Matrix. Okay, alchemy and the first appearance of Thoth. Thoth or Thoth? See, I always get them like mixed up. I might be saying it wrong, but it's always like true. So I'm saying it wrong. Okay, at one point the angels led me to a Canadian man who was an alchemist and who, amongst other things, was actually turning mercury into gold, though it can also be done from lead, which is more difficult. I studied alchemy for 2 years with him and watched his process with my own eyes. He had a sphere of glass about 18 inches in diameter filled with a liquid, and little bubbles of mercury would rise into it. They would go through a series of fluorescent colors and changes, rise to the top, turn into little balls of solid gold, then sink down to the bottom. Then he would collect all these balls of gold and use for his spiritual work. He owned an ordinary looking house in Burnaby, British Columbia, on an ordinary looking street. If you drove down the street, his house would look like any other, but under his house was a hidden laboratory. He had taken the millions of dollars in gold and dug straight down, building a huge complex filled with everything from electron balances to you name it, so that he could further his work. He didn't care about money at all, and of course the purpose in alchemy is not to make gold or money, but to understand the process of how mercury and lead changes into gold. That's like you hear these stories from the beginning of time. People wanted to turn lead into gold, mercury. So here's evidence, like he's been around this guy. He doesn't say his name, but he's from Canada, and he's making gold. And I think, I've seen movies like that too, a lot of movies. So, they're doing it, and they do have a machine that makes gold, I think lead, and it's at a college, but to run it costs so much more money to run it to produce that little piece of gold and stuff. And I'm thinking, why does it matter? Shouldn't it all be free anyways? Like, if you're running it, like, what is money and what is the cost? I mean, the electricity, but you can go solar. You can, I know you got to pay people to operate it, but it seems like it would be really fun, to do that, to learn the process. So it's a process that's important because the process of going from mercury to gold is identical to the process that a human follows going from his level of consciousness into Christ consciousness. There is an exact correlation. As a matter of fact, if you were to study all the alchemy, you would have to study every single chemical reaction in existence because every reaction has a corresponding experimental aspect to something in life. It's the old as above, so below saying. By the way, Thoth is the man who originally spoke those words when he was known as Hermes in Greece. Yeah, the Green Emerald tablets, he says that. He says it a lot of times. He say a bunch of things, and I'm going to hear it later on after I'm done with this. So, I'm going to read for a little bit more. At one point, I was sitting in front of this alchemist teacher, and we were doing a particular kind of open-eye meditation where we were locking breaths and breathing a certain way. He was sitting about 3 feet away. Update. In the light of new findings around white powder gold discovered by David Hudson, it may be that there is a physical correspondence with gold as well as a spiritual one. See, this is a side note. Yeah, that guy, I think the professor that found this, like 89 or something, they found at this temple, but they were like triangle depictions. They're called like mafkas, and they're like breads infused with nanoparticle gold, the powder gold, and what makes you live for like a long time, which infuses your mind and your neural links and all that stuff. And there's this article too I read like 7-8 years ago, who knows, probably longer. Well, I seen a video too, and it was this person, doctor, someone basically, they infuse DNA particles in their DNA. They infuse DNA particles in their DNA, and supposedly it was supposed to give like 100% input energy, and give them like energy and like limitless energy. So whoever that person is, they're like a way ahead of the game, and I don't think it said who it was, but it was somebody. So they're like doing all these things, so gold is it's called monatomic gold, and these talk about it in the Bible too, where they say this is manna, and when they were in the forest, they're feeding them manna, but they think it was bread, but now they know it was like monatomic gold, because when they turned the calf, when they melt the calf and stuff, like supposedly the story is they made like bread cakes, with the gold. But yeah, and then that professor that found that stuff, they didn't know what it was, but they thought it was like a bakery or some kind of like place. But they kept like evidence of it, and they found out years later what it was, like all these things. So it's very interesting. From me, okay. So he was sitting about 3 feet away from me, and he had been in this meditation for maybe an hour or two, a pretty fair length of time. Then something happened. Something I had never seen before, ever. He kind of went fuzzy, then disappeared right before my eyes. He was just gone. I'll never forget it. I sat there for a moment and didn't know what to do. Then I hesitantly reached over and I felt for him, and there was nobody there. I thought, wow, I was totally in astonishment. It blew my mind, as we would say in the 60s and 70s. It definitely did. I didn't know what to do, so I just continued to sit there. Then, pretty soon, a different person appeared in front of me, somebody completely and absolutely different. It wasn't even close. My alchemist teacher was about 35 years old, and this guy was maybe 60 or 70 and a lot shorter, maybe 5 feet 3 or 4. He was a little guy and he looked Egyptian. He had dark skin and his hair was kind of long but pulled back. He had a clean shaven face except for a thick beard growing from his chin that was perhaps 6 inches long and tied in 5 places. He was dressed in simple tan colored cotton clothing with long sleeves and pants and sat across legged facing me. After my shock wore off, I just looked into this person's eyes. There I saw something I hadn't seen before, except in baby's eyes. When you look into a baby's eyes, you know how easy it is because there's nothing going on, no judgment, no nothing. You can't just fall into their eyes and they'll fall into yours. Well, that's what it was like to look at this man. There were just these big baby eyes in this old body. He didn't even have anything going on. I had an instant connection with this person, and there were no barriers. He touched my heart like no one had ever done before. So there's some kind of teleportation, time slipping, a presence of a new person. Then he asked me a question. He said, there were 3 missing atoms in the universe, and did I know where they were? I had no idea what he meant, so I said, well, no. Then he gave me an experience, which I'm not going to describe, then sent me back in time to the beginning of creation and brought me forward again. It was a very interesting out of body experience. When I came back, I understood what he meant about the 3 missing atoms. At least I thought I did. And I said, well, I think what you mean is this, and proceeded to tell him what I thought. When I finished, he just smiled, bowed, and disappeared. A little later, my alchemist teacher reappeared. My teacher didn't know what change had taken place. Everything had happened seemed to be only in my experience. Interesting. I went away from that totally preoccupied with the experience. At that time, at the time, at the, gotta get better, okay? Forgive me, guys. I'm a little choppy. At the time, the angels had me working with 4 other teachers, so I was going from one to the next to the next. And my life was really full, but I couldn't think about anything except this little man who had appeared to me. I never asked him who he was, and he didn't return. Time went on, and finally the experience started to fade away, but I always carried the question, who was that guy? Why did he have me go look for those 3 atoms, and what was this all about? I had a longing to see him again because he was the purest person I had ever met, ever. 12 years later, I found out who he was. It was Stove. On November 1st, 1984, he reappeared in my life and taught me so much, but again, that's another story for later. And I'm thinking, have I seen Thoth in my dream? Because there is this dream, this guy that I seen, but he would told me things. He would tell me things for the future, and I think yeah, this dream. I'm gonna share that dream some other time, but because it's gonna lead to this book, because this book, I'd seen this, after I was like doing the meditations, I astral projected, and I had this crazy dream. Crazy dream. If you guys like this book, hit the like button, or you know, leave a comment. What are your thoughts? Okay. Thoth, the Atlantean. This man, Thoth of Egypt, goes almost all the way back to the beginning of Atlantis. He figured out 52,000 years ago how to stay conscious in one body continuously without dying, and he was renamed in his original and he has remained in his original body since then until 1991, when he moved into a new way of being far beyond our understanding. He lived through most of the period of Atlantis and even became king of Atlantis for a period of 16,000 years. During those times, he was called Chiquete Archlet Volmalites. His name was actually Arlich Volmalites, and Chiquets. I'm butchering those names. Was a title that meant the seeker of wisdom, because he really wanted to be what wisdom was. After Atlantis sank, he will discuss this subject in great detail soon. Arlich, Volmalites, and other advanced beings had to wait for about 6,000 years before they could begin to reestablish civilization. When Egypt began to come to life, he stepped forward and called himself Thoth, keeping that name all through the time of Egypt. When Egypt died, it was Thoth who started the next major culture, which was Greece. Our history books say that Pythagoras was the father of Greece, and that it was from and through the Pythagorean school that Greece unfolded, and from Greece that our present civilization emerged. Pythagoras says his own writing that Thoth took him by the hand, led him under the Great Pyramid, and taught him all the geometries of the nature of the reality. Once Greece was born through Pythagoras, Thoth then stepped into that culture in the same body he had during the time of Atlantis, and called himself Hermes. So it is written, Erlach, Volmalites, Thoth, and Hermes are the same person. True story. Read the Emerald Tablets, written 2,000 years ago by Hermes. Yeah, I'm just like, I'm getting tongue tied, but I'm also like just seeing this thing in my mind. I'm like, what the hell? That's crazy, because yeah, if you read the Emerald Tablets, if you hear them, I have the audio, but I play it like all the time, and invaluable information. It's very interesting, and I feel like hearing them right now, actually. But I'm gonna just finish this up and end this video. Since that time, he had many other names, but I still call him Thoth. He came back into my life in 1984 and worked with me just about every day until 1991. He had come in and spend maybe 4 to 8 hours a day teaching me about so many things. This is where the largest body of the information I'll be sharing with you came from. Through it correlates with other information and has been sustained by many other teachers. That's it, very interesting because I'm just like having flashbacks like reading this, but very interesting. The history of the world especially came from him, you see. Well, while in Egypt, where he was called the scribe, he wrote down everything that took place. He was a perfect person for it, right? He was constantly alive. So as a scribe, he would just sit there and watch life go by. He was a good, impartial witness, as that was a major part of his understanding of wisdom. He seldom talked or acted except when he knew that it was a divine order. Eventually, Thoth discovered how to leave Earth. He would go to another planet where there was life and just sit there and watch. He wouldn't. He would never interfere. Wouldn't say a single word. He'd be absolutely silent and just watch, just to see how they lived their lives, to get wisdom, to understand for maybe 100 years of each planet, for maybe 100 years on each planet. Then he would go somewhere else and watch. Altogether, Thoth was gone from Earth for about 2,000 years, studying other life forms, but he considered himself an Earth person. Of course, he we have all come from somewhere else at one point or another in the game of life, because Earth is not that old. It's only about 5 billion years old, and spirit is forever, always, and always has been and always will be. You always have been and always will be. Spirit cannot die, and any other understanding is just an illusion. But Dove considers himself from here because it was here that he made the first step that led him into immortality. Interesting. So, Shesat, Thoth's wife. Can you see? Man, this is interesting. Yeah, like, he left physically or like mentally, or like just, in the Emerald Tablets it says it like he took off, like he left different planets, seen giants as big as like the sky, like crazy stuff. And other planets, when he's flying by, he went to like the edge of like the universe or something. This is Thoth's wife, Shazet. She sat. She sat. She sat. She's a most extraordinary person, in some ways, at least as extraordinary as Thoth, if not more so. She was the first person to bring me consciously to Earth, which was in roughly 1500 BC. I was not physically here, but we had made a conscious link across the dimensions. She connected with me because of problems the Egyptians were having within their country that, from her point of view, would eventually affect the whole world and the outcome of humanity. We worked very closely together. I still have a very deep love for her and really close connection, though she's no longer here. Neither is Thoth. In 1991, together they left this entire octave of universes and stepped over into a completely different kind of experience of life. Their actions are important to us, as you will see. Then this guy has so much insight. I'm very open to like I believe it, like, but he says it like Like if you know it's like real, like it ain't no thing. Okay. In 1984, Dolph came back into my life 12 years after my first experience with him while meditating with my alchemy teacher. The first thing he did was to lead me through an initiation in Egypt. He had me travel all over Egypt and perform ceremonies and accept initiations, and at certain temples I was asked to enter a particular space under the Great Pyramid, repeat long phrases in the original Atlantean language, and enter a state of consciousness where my body was only light. I'll tell that story when it's time, I promise. Yeah, this guy is like been through a lot of stuff. Like he has a lot of knowledge. Okay, it's getting good. It's getting good, but I think I should stop. Dolph Geometries and the Flower of Life. Ooh, I got to stop. Okay. Alright. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching. And thank you for bearing with me. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Y'all have a good night. And the future's in your mind.